Okay, so we're back with lesson 2, part 2. So we did this little connection exercise. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy everything here to my clipboard. I'm going to open up PHP Storm and open up the PHP gaming project that we created last week. So I'm going to open my recent projects. One of the neat things, if you haven't opened anything else up, your project should just open from last week. So here was the page we built last week. And again, some of you are using Visual Studio Code. That's totally fine if you are, no problem. So I'm going to make a new file and then paste in the code we just worked on together. So we've got two files from last week, a PHP file and an HTML file. I'm going to right click and I'm going to make a new PHP file, which I will call connect. I'm going to take out all the HTML that's here, and I'm just going to paste in everything from our Word document. And I'll save the file. So what things do we need to do in order to try this page out? See if we can actually connect to the database. There's a couple things we need to do outside of our coding environment. Okay, Colton, that's one. Yep, right. Our database lives on AWS behind the VPN. So I've got to open up my VPN. So as a Windows user, I'll use my OpenVPN. If you're on Mac, you'll use TunnelBlick. So I'm going to right click my VPN client and choose connect. And now I get a little pop-up saying I'm connected to 10.8.0.10, and I get a little green icon. So that's one thing. So thanks for that suggestion, Colton. Absolutely. If we're going to connect to the database, we need our VPN. What else do we need to do if we want to actually run this page and try it out? Right. We need to turn the server on. The page is already here. It's in the htdocs folder. But if I try and go there right now, I'll put the URL in the chat for you. But for me, it's localhost 800 PHP gaming. I'll try connect.php. So I'll put the link you need. It's in the chat. Yours will be similar to mine, but without the :800. Your URL will just be localhost/phpgaming/connect.php. So why do I have this message? Can't connect to localhost. What step did we miss? Right, we haven't started up the Apache web server, so it can't connect to localhost. So I'll just open up XAMPP, which I thought I had pinned to my start menu. So I'm going to open up XAMPP, and I need to start Apache. So I'll click it, it turns yellow, and eventually it turns green. So yours is probably going to say 443 and 80, which is the default. I had to change mine And I know somebody in the class, at least one student, we had to work after class last week to get theirs running on port 800 because they had port 80 being blocked by VMware. So if I refresh now, so now our server's running, but we got an error. Access denied for user, username here. So now we have to put in the proper credentials to connect to our own databases. Right? My server's running, but let's look at the connection. We're using the PDO library to connect to a MySQL database. Here's the host, but the database name says username here. The username is username here and password here. So we need to provide our proper credentials on AWS. So the username, the DB name and username is the same. So this is where you're going to need to use your own AWS credentials, which you would have in your email from last semester. The same credentials you use for your FTP connection. So I want you to connect to your own database rather than connecting to mine. So my database name and my username. Usually I think your names is something like your first name with a number, if I'm not mistaken. And then you would find your password in the email from the computer studies technician that you got back in September. Again, this is the same password you used to connect to AWS by FTP. So I'm going to put in my username as the database name and the password. I'm going to save my changes. And then I'm going to go back to the browser. It doesn't, David, the old one should actually still work. I think the old one still works actually. You may actually have two working accounts. It doesn't really matter which one you use. You can let me know which one works. So I'm going to go back to my browser and refresh my page, and I'm hopefully going to get a message that says I'm connected now. So once my credentials are valid, I should get this message that says connected to the database. It may not matter. I think it doesn't matter which set of credentials you use. The host is going to be the same for all of us. We're all using the same server IP, 172.3.1.2.2.4.3. This is always going to be the server in this class. Ariel, what does the error say? Okay, so Ariel, you have that. If we look, it's saying, doesn't look like you've saved the changes because it says you have to change the database name as well. You've changed the username and password. You have to repeat your username is also your database name. So it's saying the database is still called username here. So you just need to change that. Okay, Colton, you're getting an error on line 10. Colton, do you have a semicolon at the end of line 8? You'll want to check that. Ariel, does that fix it? Does it work now? Okay, Colton, you do have the semicolon. Colton, is there anything different you can see in your code from mine? If it's saying unexpected token echo, Colton, the other thing you could be missing is a quote. You may have a single quote here being opened and not being closed, which would mean when we get down to echo, it crashes, it can't interpret the command. Sorry, Colton, you can turn on your mic. Okay, so everything's open and closed?
Yeah, it looks like all the quotes. Do you want me to just post the code in the comments?
Yeah, you know what? Send me a private message with your line 8. Copy and paste line 8.
Line 8? Okay.
And you can send it just to me. And I can have a look. I'm sure it's something minor. Okay, that definitely looks correct.
Well, the error is on line 10, right?
Yeah, but often in PHP, often the error is the line above. Is line 9 exactly the same? Do you have this for line 9? If space bracket exclamation mark. So there's nothing different here?
No. It's a little strange.
Okay. Want you to try this then. Hang on. I'm going to give you a link you can go to, and you can paste the whole thing for me, and then share the link. So if you go here, go to pasteofcode.org, paste your whole file in, and that'll generate a unique URL. Send me the URL in the chat.
Paste the file, or paste the whole thing.
So paste all your code here, and at the bottom you click enter, and then it'll generate a unique URL.
Okay.
And then send me that URL through the chat, and I can look and see.
Okay.
That way it's still only you and me looking at it. So if your credentials are correct, you should get connected to the database. Okay. Okay, access denied. Tanya, can you privately send me your whole line 8?
I think that worked. I'll send it to you right now.
Okay. Okay. Okay, Tanya, yeah, that looks correct. But it's saying, so I wonder if the issue is the password. Did you want to can you double check the password and make sure, that's the first thing to check, is that the password, verify that the password is correct.
Okay.
Colton, I'm just going to look at yours for a second and see if I can see anything obvious. Okay, and Colton, it's saying, I'm just going up in the trace, it's giving you a syntax error.
Yeah, it's all strange.
That's very
so the file's working because it's obviously reading it, right?
Yep.
So it's got nothing to do with the way I've set the files up.
Doesn't look like it. No, it looks correct. I may have to take a bit more time to look at this one.
Okay.
Okay, and Tanya, check your password as well, because yours looks correct. The other thing you can check, Tanya, is you can check that you can connect to the database in Mysql Workbench with that same password. That's one other way to verify, because Tanya, your host is correct, and your database name and username are the same. So That should be good, but check your password. So I will come back to you guys in a moment. So hopefully most of you have a message saying connected to the database here. So the next thing we need to do before we can build our form is we need to connect to our database in Mysql Workbench, and we want to start to create a games table. So I've put some code on Blackboard, but we're going to need to modify it. So we want to create a games table. So we need to think about, if we're building this website where we're going to display information about video games, what fields, what specific information about each game should we store in the database? So I've started to create a table called games, and I've put in two columns, an ID, which will be automatically generated by the database and will be unique. And every game will have a title that's up to 50 characters long. What other things, if we're going to make a site to add, list, edit, and delete video games, what other fields should we have in here, do you think? What other information besides just an ID and the title of a game should we track? Okay. Yeah, we could have a genre. We could have a developer. Yep. Okay, yeah, let's have maybe we'll have a release year. What type of data should we use for release year? Is it a number? Is it a decimal? Is it a string? Is it text? Is it a date? What should we use for the release year? What kind of data are we going to store for the year? Yep. Thanks, Nick. So it's going to be an integer. It's going to be a whole number, right? We're not going to have 2000.5. So we'll have a release year. Ariel, you suggested a rating. Okay, and what kind of data? What kind of data are you thinking about? Do you mean like a 5-star? Okay, yeah, so like a content rating. Okay, so that's going to be some kind of character, right? So we'll maybe say, just to be safe, we'll maybe make that 10 characters. I will update this script so you can just copy and paste it. So we've got a title, a year, a rating. David, I wasn't ignoring your suggestions about genre and developers. I want to come back to those because those are going to be stored separately in the database and linked, which we can do, but maybe a little advanced for starting out. So we can maybe add a genre and or a developer maybe later on. But we'll leave that out just for now. Anything else when we're creating a game we might want to add? Okay. Well, Chris, one thing I can tell right away is you've got my password in your code. So that's my AWS password, so you're not going to be able to connect using that password. So that's part of the issue.
So use a different password or no password?
Well, you have to use the password. Now you've used as the host, you're not connecting to AWS, is that right? You're trying to connect to your local database?
Yes.
Okay, so you have to use the password for your local MySQL account, which by default is just an empty string. So it would just be 2 single quotes for the password.
All right. Like this.
Okay, Tanya. I'll have to help you debug that after. So what I would suggest is code along as much as you can, but until we can sort out the password, you won't actually be able to connect properly. But I can help you sort it out after. Yes, Chris, like that. Now, your error, Chris, is different. It's saying something is missing. You are missing a library in your PHP setup. If it's saying could not find a driver. So I think, Chris, you're missing the PDO driver. So you may need to install a component in order for this to work. Chris, I'll have to help you with this after.
Okay.
Because you'll need to add something. Your PHP install is missing something. Okay, so just follow along the best you can with the code, and I will do my best to help you debug it after. So we're going to have for our games, we've got a title, a release year. I'll maybe also add, maybe we want to be able to upload a photo. We won't do that for now, but later on in the semester, we'll want to be able to look at processing file uploads. Okay, so I'm going to save that. So what we want to do now is we want to run this SQL command in our database to build the games table. So before we can build the PHP pages to enter a new game and save it to the database, our database has to have a place to store that data. So I'm going to open up my Mysql Workbench. Now, the instructions of how to connect to your database, they're already here. I've put the instructions on Blackboard. If you need the instructions, I will walk through it with you now, and I am recording it, but I've also put the instructions up in links, tools, and resources. The instructions for how to connect to your database are here. But I'm going to show you how to set up your connection. So the first thing to do on this page, you're going to open up Mysql Workbench, and you click the plus sign. Now, if your AWS connection, does anybody have their AWS database already listed here? If everyone has them set up already, I will skip this. Okay. So beside MySQL connections, you're going to click the plus sign. For the connection name, just put it in as AWS. The host name, we're going to use the same credentials that we put in our PHP file. So our host is 172.31.22.43. So that's going to be the host for everybody. I'll put it in the chat. So the same host that I've put in my PHP file. Our username will be the same username that you got in your email. That's odd, it shouldn't. So you'll put in your username, and then to store your password, you click this Store in Vault button, and you enter your password, your AWS password, and click OK. Once you put in your password, you can test the connection. So there's a test connection button here, and you can try to connect. And if your connection is successful, you can then just click OK. This will store the connection permanently, kind of like in your FTP client, you've saved your FTP credentials. So you don't have to type them in every time you connect to the web server. You just select it and connect. With the FTP program Scott had you install last semester, I forgot what it was called. I haven't used it. So once you've entered your connection here, to get connected, you can just double click it. And remember, you have to be connected to the VPN for this. That's the only way to access and connect to our AWS server. So once this opens up, you should get to a SQL query window that looks kind of like this. So I'm going to run the use command. This connects me to the database. I'm connected to the server, but I will need to specify which database on the server I want to use. Okay, so if it's saying access denied, Colton, you are connected to the VPN? Okay, so that suggests something's wrong with the password. I'll try your credential in a minute. So if I click the yellow lightning bolt, I'm now connected to my own database. Okay, it worked, Colton? Got it. Okay, good. So once we're connected, you can copy this script from the lesson 2 folder here that starts with create. So I'm going to copy that. It's going to create a table with these 5 columns. I'm going to change the IDs. So instead of starting at 1, they start at 10,000. And then we're going to run the describe command that's just going to show us the structure of the table. So highlight everything from the create. You can even include the use, it's fine. So just copy it. I'm going to paste it in and just make sure you use your own database name. So for me, it's Rich100. You don't have access to that. So if you use Rich100, you're going to get an error. This should be your own database name. We're going to create the table, modify the starting game ID, and then describe it. So to run all of this code, I can just click the yellow lightning bolt on the left, and I get a series of green check marks here. I've created a table, modified it so the IDs start at 10,000, and now I've described the table. So it shows me here's the table with the game ID, title, release year, rating, and photo. So now we have the structure set up. We have the container in our database where we can start saving information about the video games. So we don't need to recreate this table again. We only have to do this once. And in your relational database class, you're going to learn how to plan and design and code creating databases to hold the information that the websites we're building need to save and store. So we've built the back-end piece now. We've got a database with a table in it that can hold information about video games. So that was step one. Step two is to build a form that kind of mirrors the columns in the table. And then step three is building the PHP page that ties them together, that will take all the user inputs, connect to the database, and start saving game data in here. So once your table is built, we want to go back to our code editor and we want to start to create the page with our form. So if you're having troubles getting connected, I'll do my best to help you either on a break or after class. But I know there's a number of people needing help, so it may take a little bit of time. So I'm going to make a new page, and this page is going to hold our form. So I'm going to right-click and make a new PHP file, and I'm going to call this game-details. I'm going to use a PHP extension, even though for today, the file is only HTML. We're going to add some PHP code to this file in a couple of weeks. So better we use a PHP extension now. So call it game details. I'm going to change the title. And I'm going to use an HTML form. So we'll put a form tag on here. And there's a couple of attributes we should set with our form. Any idea which attributes of the form we want to add? We're going to kind of build this incrementally. We won't build it all at once. We'll do it in little pieces. So you did work with forms briefly with Scott last semester. So what properties should we set in our form? Or am I too far ahead here? Maybe give me a bit of an indicator how you're doing. Are you still stuck on the database? Do I need to go back to the database? Is there something we've done that you need to have a look at, another look at? Please let me know. Okay. Thanks, Colton. Does anybody need to see anything we've done up until now? Do you need me to go back? The database code, yeah, David, it's already posted. It's right here. It's on Blackboard. In lesson 2. You don't have to write any of the code. You can just use this code. The only thing you need to change here is the name of the database. Yeah, you just had to refresh to update it. So you should just be able to copy it and paste it. I'm not expecting you to write the SQL commands at this point. I know you haven't really learned this yet. So I'm going to be giving you the SQL for a while until you start to learn some of these commands in your relational database course. So to get the complete script, you just have to refresh the lesson 2 folder. So now we're going to go back to our game details form, and there's two things we're going to add here. When we create a form, we've got two methods, get and post. And almost all the time, we're going to use the post method, and we'll explore why. We'll see the difference between post and get in a minute. Our form also needs an action. An action is the URL or the name of the page that's going to receive the form submission and process it. So we'll put this action as savegame.php. So here's our form. My code editor, it highlights this in yellow. It says, well, there is no savegame.php. That's fine. We'll create that page next. We're only creating 2 pages. And then in here, just for starters, we'll keep our form really simple. We'll add a field set. And we'll put on a label, a text input, and a button. We'll complete the rest of the form a bit later. I'm going to put on a label. For title. And I'm going to just put in an input. The name is title. And the ID is title. And we'll say that it's required. So you can't submit the form if the game title is empty. And then we'll just put on a button that says save. So it's a pretty simple form. A label, a text box, and a button. I'll put all of this up on paste of code if you need it. And then we can check out the form, see what it looks like. So here's all the code on our game details. I've put the link in the chat if you need it. So what does this page look like? Let's fire it up in the browser. Let's check it out. So I'm going to go to my game details page. So here's the HTML that comes out. We get a field set, so it groups the label and form together. It says, gives me a little code hint, please fill out the field. And it gives me a submit button. What will happen if we submit our form? What will the result be? If I click save, okay, David says nothing. Any other predictions? So you think it'll just be a blank screen or it'll just stay here? Right. If I click save, we get a 404 not found. How come it tries to load this page? Where does this URL come from? Why is it going to save game? Right, our form action says when the form is submitted, load savegame.php. So how do we fix this error so that we don't get a 404 not found error when a user submits our form? What should we do to fix this? There's no problem with our code so far. Our code is right. If we go back to our schema and look at what we have, we built database table, we've built a form, but we haven't built the page to process the form, the action page. So to get this error to go away, we need to create savegame.php. So let's go ahead and create that file. Now there's a couple ways of doing it. I could go and create a new PHP file. This is one of the reasons I like PHP Storm. If I put my mouse over this, notice it's highlighted in yellow. If I put my mouse over it, it gives me this little pop-up with some suggested fixes to the fact that this file doesn't exist. And if I mouse over, it gives me a link here. Hey, do you want to create savegame.php? Well, yes, I do. So I'll just actually click that, and it will automatically build the page for me. So if I go back to my browser and submit my form, I'll get a blank page. I won't get a 404 error anymore. So if I go back and submit my form, now we have a page that loads successfully. So we need 2 pages for saving data. 1 page to collect the information, and a second page to process all the values entered by our user. So we'll add a title here. It says saving game details. So we're going to do this just one step at a time. We're not going to save to the database yet. We'll do that after. But the first thing we want to do is store the title value entered in the form in a variable. So I'm going to create a variable called title. And all variables in PHP, they always start with a $sign. So how do we get the title value? How do we get what's typed into this input that's called title? Our form uses post, so we can get the information entered by the user this way. $_ and PHP Storm recognizes it, post. And in square brackets and single quotes, it will take whatever the user typed and store it in this variable. How could we display the value back to the screen so we can show what the user entered for the game title? Right, we can just use echo. So let's just print out the title on the screen. So if I refresh my save page and resubmit the form, whatever I enter in the title should show up on the next page. So now when I submit my form, whatever's entered here, if I want to change this to some other game, by using post, it can properly read what the user entered in the form. Now there's one common mistake, common gotcha here. What will happen if I do this? I've got post title, but with a capital T. If I resubmit the form, what's going to show up on the save page?
It'll display an error.
You got it. Thanks, Chris. undefined, so title with a capital T is undefined, right? So these are case sensitive. It has to match exactly the name attribute of the form input. So if we called it title with a lowercase t here, we have to call it title with a lowercase t here as well. So now when I resend my form, it's working. Okay, it is 10 to 1. So we've got a working form. It's pretty tiny. We want to add the other fields on here. And then we also want to combine some of the code that's here where we're reading the form values, but then we want to use our database to connect, and we want to actually save the values from the form into the database on AWS. So we will take a pause here. I'm going to upload the code and show you how to get everything we've done so far if you need it. The MySQL code is already on Blackboard in lesson 2 for you to enter. We'll take a 10-minute break. I'll try to come back sooner so that I can help. I know the few people that are having errors. If I can help a few people before we resume, I'll do my best to do that. Okay, so we will take a break here.